Ladies and gentlemen, there's a dangerous game that many men play, sometimes without even realizing the cost. A man who juggles multiple women at once might think he's winning, that he's maximizing his potential, that he's avoiding the trap of commitment. But what if I told you he's actually losing everything that makes him strong? Because the truth is, when a man divides his attention among multiple women, he doesn't gain control, he loses it. He loses his discipline, his focus, his integrity, and perhaps most importantly, his sense of self. We live in an era where options seem endless. Swipe left, swipe right, move on, keep looking. The idea that something or someone better is always around the corner has created a generation of men who struggle to commit, who fear responsibility, and who mistake temporary pleasure for lasting fulfillment. But at what cost? How does this mindset affect not just the women involved, but the man himself? How does it shape his future, his legacy, his ability to build something meaningful? This isn't about morality alone. It's about strength, wisdom, and understanding what truly makes a man powerful. The way a man approaches relationships says a great deal about his ability to lead, to be disciplined, to stay true to his values. If he can't control his own desires, then he isn't in control at all. He's simply a slave to them. When a man chooses to engage with multiple women at once, what he's really doing is opting to spread his energy in 1,000 directions, none of which will ever truly capture the essence of who he is. This is not a decision made lightly, but one rooted in insecurity and the fear of missing out. Men are often told that they must be dominant, assertive, and assert their value through conquests, yet in doing so they lose the most crucial thing that defines a man's strength, his ability to focus. A man who lacks focus will ultimately end up with nothing, dividing his attention between various relationships, constantly shifting his emotional energy, creates nothing of substance. It's easy to think that by keeping his options open, a man can avoid making the tough decisions and avoid facing the true consequences of commitment. But the truth is, this lack of depth, this endless searching, is what leaves him empty in the end. The allure of having multiple women vying for his attention feeds into a man's ego, making him feel desirable and needed. However, this can easily become an addiction, a never-ending pursuit to validate his worth, a validation he cannot find from external sources. What these men fail to understand is that this game is a losing one. They seek pleasure and excitement in fleeting moments, but are too afraid to face the deeper emotions that are the true source of fulfillment. Instead of building relationships with depth, they accumulate superficial connections, none of which offer lasting meaning. What's worse, the more he immerses himself in this pursuit, the more detached he becomes from his own authentic self. Without the focus and discipline to nurture one meaningful relationship, he will never gain the clarity necessary to move forward in his life. In every action, there is a consequence, whether it's immediate or delayed. By choosing to spread himself thin, the man is avoiding the confrontation with his own limitations, his own capacity for true emotional intimacy, and this avoidance catches up with him sooner or later. A man is at his strongest when he is grounded in a sense of purpose, a sense of direction. It's when he is rooted in responsibility, in meaningful relationships, that he becomes truly capable of growth. The man who refuses to commit to one woman, instead flitting from one connection to another, is trapped in a cycle of chasing temporary pleasure. There is no true fulfillment in this behavior because it perpetuates emptiness. These men may appear powerful, charming, and desirable, but beneath the surface, they are fragile, lacking the foundation that leads to enduring success. What's more, this lifestyle causes an inevitable emotional detachment that spills into other areas of a man's life. When you are not fully engaged with another person, when your emotional energy is divided among many, you become incapable of making deep, meaningful decisions in any aspect of your life. You cannot lead your career or your personal ambitions with any focus if you are constantly questioning what's next, what's better, what else is out there. A man who lacks the ability to choose, who is always looking for the next best thing, will never accomplish anything meaningful. He will never reach the heights that are attainable only through deep commitment and sacrifice. Without deep investment in his relationships, a man cannot reach his true potential. He will be stuck at the surface, looking at what could be without truly experiencing it. This superficiality does not only harm the man, but it inevitably hurts the women involved as well. Women seek emotional connection and stability, qualities that are built through time and trust. But when a man engages with multiple women, he betrays their trust. He creates confusion, plays with their emotions, and makes them question their own worth. There is no fulfillment in a relationship built on instability. And as he continues to flit from one person to another, the women around him feel the brunt of his negligence. What he is doing is not only a betrayal of his own emotional depth, but also of their trust and emotional vulnerability. These women may not immediately recognize it, but they will eventually grow disillusioned, realizing that they were never truly a priority to him. Men who engage in this type of behavior fail to realize that the real power lies in creating something that endures. The ability to commit, to nurture, and to grow within the confines of one relationship is a skill that many men have forgotten. It is precisely in the process of becoming vulnerable, of risking pain, that a man learns to stand strong. The deeper the emotional connection, the more rewarding the experience. And it is only in long-term commitment that a man will find his true strength. Relationships that are temporary, that are without depth, do nothing but reinforce weakness, and they will eventually leave him hollow. What is necessary for a man to grow, to thrive, is the ability to direct his attention, to dedicate himself to a cause greater than the pursuit of pleasure. He must learn to make sacrifices, to commit to something or someone for the long haul, and to invest fully in his relationships. Only then can he tap into the power that lies dormant within him. Only then can he unlock the potential to become the man he was always meant to be. It is in devotion, in responsibility, in depth, that a man finds not only success but fulfillment. A man who understands this, who learns to focus his attention and dedicate himself to meaningful relationships, will emerge stronger than ever. The choices we make every day, the way we decide to invest our energy, shape the trajectory of our lives. A man who spreads himself too thin is not a man who leads. He is a man who runs from his own potential, from the deeper meaning that only commitment can bring. By choosing a path of depth, of devotion, of true connection, he ultimately chooses to rise to a level of power that the fleeting allure of multiple women could never offer. When a man chooses to spread his energy across multiple relationships, to entertain a constant stream of distractions, he is not engaging in an act of true power. No, he is running from it. Power, real power, is about commitment. It's about focus. It's about choosing to invest deeply in something and seeing it through to its completion. When a man engages with multiple women, he's merely dipping his toes in the shallow end of life. He avoids the depth of real connection because the depth requires vulnerability. It requires the sacrifice of ego, of immediate gratification, and the willingness to face not just what is good, but also what is difficult and uncomfortable. It is easy to want to keep your options open. It feels safer, in a sense. The world today has encouraged that. With the constant bombardment of choices, we live in a society that glorifies variety, that elevates the individual who can have it all without asking the deeper question, what does it cost? The reality is that the more options you have, the less likely you are to make a meaningful decision. Every new choice dilutes the impact of the one you might have made if you were focused on something more profound. A man who runs from commitment runs from his own potential, and in doing so, he sacrifices his future for fleeting pleasure. A man who spreads his attention too thinly, who keeps relationships shallow and transactional, is missing out on the greatest gift life has to offer, the deep emotional satisfaction that comes from real intimacy. It is in the act of committing to one person, in facing the inevitable struggles that come with it, that a man begins to truly understand himself. He will face his flaws, he will confront his fears, but it is only through that confrontation, only through those challenges that he grows. That's the paradox of life. It is the struggle, not the avoidance, that leads to strength. A man who chooses multiple women is avoiding the very thing that will make him stronger, the deep, uncomfortable, emotional work that comes with real commitment. The man who seeks the validation of many will never feel validated. It's simple, really. External validation, the kind that comes from constantly being surrounded by attention and adoration, is hollow. It is fleeting. It can never fill the emptiness within because it is not real. It is a reflection, but not a substance. And yet, many men chase this illusion. They seek out novelty in the hope that it will lead to lasting satisfaction. But all they find is a temporary high. They find that each new connection is just a band-aid over the deep, unresolved wounds that they carry. In contrast, the man who faces the challenge of committing to one person has the opportunity to heal those wounds. Through the work of a deep, sustained relationship, he confronts not just his partner's flaws, but his own. Relationships, when done right, force you to grow. They demand that you become a better person. They ask that you make sacrifices. They ask that you be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. A man who has the courage to stay, to commit, to fight through the hard moments is the one who experiences real growth. What's more, commitment forces clarity. When you are focused on one relationship, you are forced to prioritize what really matters. You can't hide in the shallows. You can't skate by. You must engage with what is real, with what is difficult, with what is true. You must become intentional. You must learn to navigate the messy, painful parts of life because those are the parts that lead to growth. By contrast, when a man splits his attention across many relationships, he is never forced to engage at this level. He can move from one person to another, always searching for the next high, never staying long enough to truly grow or learn. This idea of fleeting connection, of avoiding deep emotional involvement, is often perpetuated by a culture that prizes independence above all else. But independence is not freedom. True freedom comes from having the courage to engage with the complexity of life and relationships. It comes from having the discipline to commit, to work through the challenges, and to grow. The man who bounces from one person to the next is not free. He is enslaved to his own fears, to his own inability to confront the discomfort that comes with true growth. It is far easier to run, to distract yourself, to avoid the pain. But in avoiding the pain, you avoid the greatest lessons life has to offer. It is the lessons, the growth, the emotional depth that matter. The man who seeks constant validation through multiple relationships is never truly satisfied because he is chasing an illusion. True satisfaction, real fulfillment, comes from the ability to build something of substance. It comes from the ability to build a relationship, not with someone else, but with yourself. It comes from knowing who you are, knowing your values, and being willing to face the parts of yourself that you would rather avoid. And the only way to truly face those parts is through commitment, through choosing to invest in something that is worth the pain, worth the struggle, worth the sacrifice. The man who commits is the man who lives with purpose. He is the man who has the courage to engage with life fully, to embrace both the joy and the struggle that come with building a meaningful relationship. And that man is the one who will ultimately find peace, satisfaction, and fulfillment. The man who bounces from one woman to the next will always be chasing something that cannot be caught. He will always be running from himself, from his own potential, and in doing so, he will miss the very thing he is seeking: depth, meaning, and fulfillment. True strength lies not in having many choices, but in making one choice and committing to it fully. That is the path to growth. That is the path to a life well lived. When a man is faced with the opportunity to invest in multiple relationships, he stands at a crossroads that demands his attention. It is at this point that he must ask himself, what is it that he truly seeks? Is it validation, excitement, the thrill of novelty? Or does he yearn for something deeper, something that transcends the superficiality of fleeting encounters? A man who divides his time and attention between multiple women risks missing the profound connection that can only come from genuine commitment. The truth is, a man who chooses to spread himself thin, dabbling in several relationships without fully investing in any of them, ultimately denies himself the chance to become the best version of himself. In life, there is a temptation to chase after whatever feels good in the moment. The pursuit of pleasure, the thrill of being desired. These are natural impulses. But it is when a man begins to chase after these impulses at the expense of deeper, more meaningful relationships that he begins to lose sight of who he is and what he truly wants. The problem with constantly seeking new experiences, new faces, new attention, is that it keeps a man distracted from the deeper questions that he should be asking himself. He is too busy flitting from one thing to the next, never settling, never really delving into the depths of a single relationship, to ask the critical questions. What does it mean to truly connect with another human being? What does it mean to be vulnerable, to expose your true self, to let someone in? These are the questions that, when left unanswered, will leave a man feeling empty, unfulfilled, and ultimately dissatisfied. The man who bounces between relationships without truly committing to any of them is not building anything of substance. He is not creating a foundation upon which he can stand. He is not allowing himself the opportunity to face the trials and tribulations that come with real intimacy. And yet, real intimacy is where growth happens. It is in the struggle, the difficulty, the discomfort, that a person is forced to confront their limitations, their fears, their insecurities. When a man remains detached, when he keeps his options open and his connections shallow, he never has to confront those uncomfortable truths about himself. He never has to grow. Instead, he remains stagnant, running in circles, avoiding the emotional labor that is required for real change. Real relationships, the kind that bring about true growth and transformation, are not easy. They require time, effort, vulnerability, and above all, commitment. It is in the act of choosing one person and saying, "I am here for you, no matter what," that a man begins to learn what it means to be fully human. It is in the act of showing up, day after day, facing the challenges that arise, that a person discovers the strength and resilience within themselves that they didn't know they had. But this kind of commitment is not something that can be achieved through a superficial connection. It requires deep, intentional engagement with another person. It demands that you face the parts of yourself that are difficult to confront, that you work through the friction and tension that naturally arise in any relationship. When a man spreads himself across many relationships, he avoids this deep work. He never has to confront the hard truths about himself. He can move from one person to another, taking what he needs in the moment and then walking away when things get difficult. But in doing so, he is not building anything lasting. He is not learning, growing, or evolving. He is only delaying the inevitable. The need to face himself, to confront his weaknesses, and to become the man he was meant to be. And it is only through this confrontation, through the willingness to stay and work through the difficulty, that a man can achieve true growth. This is the paradox of life. Growth comes not from running away from discomfort, but from leaning into it. When a man commits to one person, he is forced to face the discomfort of vulnerability, the discomfort of being truly seen, And in doing so, he learns to navigate his own inner world. He learns what it means to sacrifice, to compromise, to give and take. He learns what it means to love and to be loved in return. It is in this process that a man becomes whole. But when a man keeps his options open, when he chooses not to engage with the deep, difficult work of building a lasting connection, he misses out on the opportunity to become the man he was always meant to be. The truth is, commitment is a powerful thing. It is in committing to one person, one relationship, that a man begins to discover who he really is. It is in this process of mutual growth, of working through the hard times together, that a man becomes stronger, more resilient, and more capable of facing whatever life throws his way. A man who spreads his attention across many relationships does not experience this growth. He remains distracted, avoiding the deep work that is required for personal development. And in doing so, he limits his own potential. When a man chooses to invest in a single relationship, he is saying, I choose you with all your flaws, all your baggage, and all your imperfections. And in return, I will work with you, alongside you, to build something that is meaningful and lasting. This is where true strength lies. It is in the ability to choose, to commit, to stand firm in the face of challenges. And it is in the act of doing so that a man grows into the person he was meant to be. The man who avoids commitment, who keeps his options open, is only postponing his own evolution. He is only running from the very thing that will help him become the best version of himself. If a man wants to live a life of purpose, if he wants to grow and evolve into someone who can truly stand tall in the face of adversity, he must be willing to commit. He must be willing to put in the work, to face the discomfort, and to build something meaningful with another person. Anything less than this is merely distraction, and distraction will never lead to fulfillment. Only through commitment, only through choosing one path and walking it with integrity, will a man find the growth and satisfaction that he is truly seeking. When a man starts juggling multiple relationships, he embarks on a perilous path that often leads to confusion, instability, and a disconnection from his own sense of purpose. In this fast-paced, fragmented world where distractions are abundant, it's easy to fall into the trap of seeking immediate gratification from different sources. But what happens when a man stretches himself too thin, spreading his emotional energy across multiple partners, never truly investing in any one relationship? What is the cost of this transient way of living? The first thing to recognize is that a man who doesn't focus on one relationship, one meaningful connection, runs the risk of never really experiencing what it means to build something lasting. The modern world glorifies options and constantly promotes the idea that more is always better. We are told that if we are unsatisfied with one thing, we should seek out something else. And that's certainly true in many areas of life. But relationships, real, deep, intimate relationships, do not work this way. The very nature of human connection requires time, patience, vulnerability, and commitment. When a man divides his attention between several women, he fragments not only his time, but also his emotional capacity. He is never truly present, never truly invested. He avoids the difficult work of truly understanding someone else, of grappling with their flaws, their insecurities, their fears, and their desires. Instead, he's constantly running from one person to the next, maintaining a superficial, transactional approach to intimacy. This is a hollow existence. A man who does this is denying himself the opportunity to grow within a partnership. It is in committed relationships that individuals are challenged to confront their own weaknesses and fears. It is through the friction, the tension, and the difficult moments that people grow. Relationships, when done right, force individuals to shed their egos, to look beyond their own self-centeredness, and to invest in something greater than themselves. But when a man divides his time and emotional energy between several women, he avoids that confrontation. He can move from one partner to another, never truly facing the inevitable discomfort that comes with being in a committed relationship, discomfort that, when processed and worked through, leads to growth. In some ways, the multiple relationship path reflects an immature desire for constant novelty, a belief that fulfillment comes from variety and choice. But this desire for variety often masks a deeper fear of commitment, a fear of being vulnerable, and a fear of real emotional exposure. The man who cannot commit, who flits between women, is not a man who has learned to face his own vulnerabilities. Instead, he is avoiding them. Commitment forces a person to look inward, to challenge their own limitations, to confront their fears of rejection, inadequacy, and dependency. And while these are uncomfortable things to face, it is only by facing them head-on that a person can grow. The shallow pursuit of multiple relationships never allows this kind of introspection. It leads to a fragmented sense of self, where the man never truly knows who he is or what he stands for. When a man spends his time in this disjointed manner, he fails to learn the art of communication and cooperation, essential skills in any relationship. Real relationships require effort and work, both from the man and from the woman. They demand openness, honesty, and the capacity to engage in difficult conversations. A man who is constantly jumping between partners is rarely given the opportunity to practice these essential skills. He does not learn to navigate the complexity of another person's emotions, thoughts, and desires in a meaningful, profound way. Instead, he moves on to the next partner when things become challenging, denying himself the chance to mature and become more skilled in the delicate art of relational dynamics. To be clear, this is not to say that a man should avoid relationships altogether or remain stagnant in an unfulfilling one. That too can be a form of escapism, a way of avoiding discomfort by settling for what is easy or convenient. But the issue at hand is the impulse to avoid real intimacy altogether by perpetually pursuing superficial connections. Relationships are not a game, and they should not be treated as such. They require deep investment, understanding, and, most importantly, sacrifice. A man who continuously avoids these elements by spreading himself too thin across several relationships is not truly engaging with life in the most profound way possible. The man who commits to one person and truly works to build something meaningful and long-lasting is the man who will experience the fullest form of growth. Relationships are not meant to be endless sources of entertainment or distractions from the pain and hardship of life. They are meant to be transformative. They should challenge us, push us to grow, and force us to confront our weaknesses. It is only in these spaces, where vulnerability and commitment coexist, that we find the true depth of what it means to be human. The man who faces a single relationship with courage and integrity is the one who grows. He is the one who learns to work through difficulties, to share himself fully, and to build something together with another person that transcends the individual self. It is in this way that both individuals in the relationship grow. The connection between them becomes something more than just an arrangement or a mere collection of pleasures. It becomes a partnership, a journey, a shared vision of a life that is greater than either person could have imagined on their own. The man who divides his energy between multiple relationships is ultimately left with nothing but a series of disconnected experiences, none of which will ever give him the deep satisfaction and fulfillment he craves. It is commitment that leads to growth, not avoidance. And it is through the work of real relationships, those that require the most from us, that we find the best version of ourselves. The decision to engage in multiple relationships at once may seem appealing to some, promising freedom, novelty, and an escape from the pressures of commitment. However, the consequences of spreading yourself too thin emotionally, psychologically, and relationally are profound and damaging, not just to the people involved, but to yourself as well. When a man enters into several relationships without the commitment to any, He unwittingly creates a life that is fragmented, disjointed, and devoid of real depth. He builds a superficial existence, one that may seem satisfying on the surface, but ultimately leaves him unfulfilled, confused, and disconnected from the very things that bring meaning to life. A man who juggles multiple relationships is not simply testing the waters, he is avoiding the deeper engagement that comes with true intimacy. True intimacy requires time, effort, and a willingness to confront discomfort. In every deep relationship, there are moments of conflict, moments of pain, moments of vulnerability. These moments are not to be feared or avoided, they are to be embraced, because it is in these moments that growth occurs. The person who avoids this process by engaging in multiple superficial relationships denies himself the opportunity to grow. Instead of facing the complexities of one individual, understanding their needs, fears, desires, and flaws, he chooses the easier route, one that avoids emotional complexity and depth. But this comes at a cost. He never learns what it means to truly connect with another person on a meaningful level. In our society, we often place a high value on autonomy and personal freedom. There is an idea that happiness lies in having choices, in not being bound to any one person or any one situation. And yet, this very pursuit of freedom without responsibility can lead to chaos. It can create a life that is unsustainable, where nothing has true meaning or value. Real freedom, the kind that leads to true fulfillment, comes not from avoiding commitment or running away from the deeper work of building lasting relationships, but from engaging with life, people, and responsibilities in an authentic, responsible way. It is through commitment that a person finds the room to grow, to face their own inadequacies, to evolve into something greater than they were before. The man who cannot commit is denying himself this opportunity for growth. Moreover, a man who is spread thin across multiple relationships risks becoming a person of contradictions, someone who lacks coherence in his own life. The time he invests in keeping up with the various demands of multiple partners is time he doesn't spend working on himself, his career, or his own self-awareness. Instead of becoming a more integrated, focused person, he becomes increasingly fragmented, juggling different personas for different people. This is not only exhausting, but ultimately hollow. The essence of who a man is becomes diluted, and he loses touch with what is truly important to him. He becomes so focused on maintaining the illusion of success in these multiple relationships that he neglects his own deeper needs and desires. A real relationship, one that is built on mutual respect, trust, and shared vision, demands a man's full attention. It asks for emotional availability, for the ability to listen deeply, to engage authentically. A person who divides his attention between multiple partners cannot provide these things. Instead of being present, he is perpetually distracted. Instead of listening, he is constantly waiting for the next exciting thing, the next person, the next thrill. This is not true. Connection, it is a fleeting, transient experience that offers no real depth. And it is not just the women involved who are left dissatisfied. The man himself, at a deeper level, is left unfulfilled. He has created an existence that is comfortable in the short term, but lacks the lasting satisfaction that comes with meaningful emotional investment. The absence of commitment can lead to a profound sense of loneliness. It may seem paradoxical, but the man who cannot commit to one woman often finds himself more isolated than if he had simply chosen one person and worked through the inevitable difficulties of a committed relationship. It's easy to feel connected when the relationship is new, when everything is fresh and exciting. But over time, the absence of deep commitment leads to a lack of trust, and without trust, a relationship cannot thrive. The man who has scattered his emotional energy among several partners finds himself unable to truly trust anyone because there is no space for genuine vulnerability. Without trust, without vulnerability, there can be no real emotional connection. And without real emotional connection, the man is left with only a shell of what a relationship should be. When you're constantly juggling multiple relationships, it's easy to convince yourself that you are successful, that you are in control, that you are desirable. But the truth is that the man who fails to commit is actually avoiding the very things that make life meaningful. He is avoiding the opportunity to create something real, something lasting. He is avoiding the difficult work of emotional depth, of learning to navigate the complexities of a single person's life and struggles. He avoids becoming the kind of man who is capable of real love, the kind of man who knows what it means to be vulnerable, to be reliable, to stand with another person through thick and thin. This avoidance of commitment, this pursuit of multiple relationships, reflects a fear of responsibility and ultimately a fear of growth. To commit to someone is to be willing to face your own imperfections, to confront the ways in which you fall short, and to work through these challenges together. It's not easy, it's often difficult, sometimes painful, and requires tremendous emotional maturity. But it is through these trials that we develop strength, character, and integrity. The man who can commit to a single person and invest deeply in that relationship is the man who can face himself honestly, who can take responsibility for his actions, and who can grow in ways that are simply not possible when living in a state of constant emotional distraction. The man who juggles multiple relationships is only delaying the inevitable truth. That true fulfillment comes from deep emotional investment, from a willingness to be vulnerable, and from the courage to commit to one person, one relationship, and to see it through. It's in this commitment that a man finds his true strength, and it's through the work of a lasting relationship that he discovers what it means to be truly alive. A man who juggles multiple relationships does so with an internal conflict, an unresolved tension between his desire for autonomy and the need for deep, meaningful connection. This conflict, if left unchecked, leads to inner turmoil. He may tell himself that he is merely enjoying life, that he is maximizing his options, that he is free, but the truth is that he is trapped in a pattern of avoidance. The avoidance of what? Of responsibility, of commitment, of true intimacy. He distances himself from the very things that could lead him to greater understanding of himself and of others. He convinces himself that his choices are liberating, that the excitement of novelty is what he craves. But over time, this lifestyle becomes exhausting, empty, and ultimately unsatisfying. In the beginning, he might convince himself that he is living a life that others envy. But there's a profound difference between freedom and chaos. The man who does not commit is not free. He is enslaved by the necessity of keeping up appearances, maintaining multiple emotional fronts, and, most damaging of all, avoiding the very possibility of vulnerability. The truth is that deep relationships require vulnerability. They require the courage to be fully seen and understood, and to face the complexities of another person's humanity. The man who fails to commit avoids this, and in doing so, he avoids the opportunity to grow, to mature, and to become someone who is worthy of the deep connection that only a committed, long-term relationship can provide. It's important to recognize that relationships, at their core, are an exercise in self-discipline. They require a kind of emotional maturity that many fail to develop when they remain in a state of constant emotional distraction. When a man engages with multiple women, he often finds himself oscillating between different personas, trying to maintain the illusion of excitement and novelty. He has to perform to keep things light, to avoid the inevitable depth that comes with familiarity. And while this may seem harmless at first, it erodes his sense of self. In the long run, the person who engages in superficial relationships becomes disconnected from who they are at their core. They fail to confront their own needs and desires because they are constantly trying to manage the expectations of others. The challenge of committing to a single person of facing the difficult conversations and the uncomfortable truths that inevitably arise in any deep relationship is not one that should be feared. It is in these moments of discomfort that real growth takes place. There is nothing easy about facing the darkness within yourself and within another person, but it is through these confrontations that the greatest rewards are earned. The man who avoids commitment and instead keeps a stable of relationships is avoiding his own development. He avoids the opportunity to learn empathy, patience, and the art of communication. These are the very qualities that form the foundation of any meaningful connection. Without them, relationships remain hollow and fleeting, and the man who keeps moving from one relationship to the next, seeking novelty, is left unfulfilled. Moreover, the cost of avoiding commitment goes beyond the individual man. It affects everyone he interacts with. Relationships are reciprocal, and when one person is not fully invested, the other is left to pick up the emotional slack. This dynamic creates an imbalance, a lack of trust, and ultimately resentment. A person who is not emotionally available cannot provide the kind of support that another person needs. And while the man may think he is keeping things casual, he is inadvertently leaving a trail of broken connections in his wake. This not only harms others, but also damages his own ability to build trust and intimacy in the future. Eventually, the lack of emotional depth leads to a profound sense of emptiness. The man who avoids true intimacy begins to feel isolated, even if he is surrounded by people. He cannot connect on a deep level because he has trained himself to remain distant, to keep parts of himself hidden. The relationships he engages in may provide temporary gratification, but they fail to address his deeper needs. Over time, this pattern of avoidance creates a life that is marked by a profound loneliness, not of being alone, but of being unable to truly connect with others. The man who avoids commitment may never fully understand the depth of this loneliness until it becomes overwhelming, until it leaves him searching for meaning in places that can never provide it. The truth is, a man who cannot commit to one woman is missing out on one of the most profound experiences life has to offer. A committed relationship is not an obstacle. It is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to learn how to give, how to sacrifice, how to understand and accept the flaws of another person while confronting your own. It is an opportunity to build something lasting, something meaningful. The person who avoids this opportunity out of fear or desire for freedom misses out on the chance to experience the fullness of what it means to be alive. Commitment is not something that happens in isolation. It is not a decision that is made in a vacuum. The commitment to another person is inherently a commitment to something greater than yourself. It is a recognition that the person you choose to commit to is not simply an object of your affection, but a person with their own needs, dreams, struggles, and desires. When you commit to them, you are committing to being there for them through the ups and downs, through the good and bad. You are committing to growing together, to facing challenges together, and to supporting one another as you both evolve. This is a depth of experience that cannot be replicated in superficial relationships. The man who cannot commit is ultimately avoiding the deeper questions of life, the questions that challenge him to grow into something better. It is easy to remain in the shallow end, to keep things light and fun, but it is in the deep waters where true personal development takes place. To commit to another person is to dive into those depths, to face the unknown, to accept the discomfort of vulnerability, and to grow in ways that will make you a better person for both yourself and your partner. This is the kind of growth that defines a meaningful life. The man who avoids commitment misses out on this growth, and in doing so, misses out on the opportunity to become the best version of himself. A man who cannot commit to a single woman misses out on the profound opportunities that true relationships offer. Commitment challenges him to confront his fears, develop emotional maturity, and grow into a deeper, more fulfilled version of himself.